Good afternoon and welcome to Live Impact News here on 13 News Now Plus. 1 o'clock p.m., December 3rd. It's a Wednesday. The middle of the week has arrived. The weekend is in our sights. There's a weather impact alert coming later in the week, but that's something that we'll get to later on because we've got a live event that we want to take you out to straight away. It is extremely relevant to a lot of what we talked about yesterday on Live Impact News. This is a group in Minnesota. Their mission is to enhance understanding, encourage dialogue, protect civil liberties, and build coalitions that promote justice and mutual understanding. That is CARE Minnesota. Now, we are headed out to Minnesota to talk about a press conference regarding ICE activity. That is what ABC has reported this press conference is on. Why is that so relevant to what we talked about yesterday? Well, we know that President Trump and his administration have been vocal in targeting the Somali community in Minnesota. Yesterday, we listened to a press conference from the mayors of Minneapolis and St. Paul, as well as a city council member in Minneapolis, speaking about supporting the Somali community in their state and the fact that ICE may be coming in. We heard from a police chief who talked about what their interactions with ICE would be like. So it is a hot button topic right now in Minnesota. A press conference going on right now with CARE on the walls behind the speakers as they speak about potential ICE activity in Minnesota. I know this was a little bit rapid fire. I hope it was easy to understand. Let's listen into the press conference. Maybe we'll do more context afterwards. For now, let's go live out to Minnesota.
And they could be represented, and also they can be provided that support. So we obviously know the number of undocumented Somalis is very, very small. But even we also, and then we mentioned this a little bit, but these ICE raids means that this will also expand the vulnerability and the targeting of the larger undocumented population here in the Twin Cities, who are essential to everything that's happening to our state and our businesses. And so there's a possibility that we've heard of other folks from West Africa and other folks who are going through immigration process as well, which means that there's a possibility that this ICE raid is targeting black people. And again, going back to the earlier point, this is a racist process that we're seeing happen, being manifested by the highest office of this land. But we live in a society that has checks and balances, and we're going to ensure that checks and balances are in place, and and people can do that. So being safe, this, as Alec just mentioned, this is not the time to be fearful of just the news and everything. This is the time to know your rights, how to protect yourself, how to ensure that you have a plan. And that's another thing about we talk about having a plan. The plan means knowing that even if you're arrested, how to reach people, how to have people know what's happening. We know ICE agents are driving unmarked cars. That you can't really tell who they are. So just being safe and being aware of what's your area and just being available to yourself to know that you can follow those guidelines as well. Is there anybody? Yeah.
Could you give more information on what has happened so far? Have there been any arrests so far? You mentioned detention. A couple of people have been detained. Can you just give more information?
Yeah. So I think you guys can add to it. I think basically right now we know that escalation has increased. We know individuals have been picked up over last week and up to this week. It's hard to know an actual number because the federal government actually does not share the data for days on end. We don't know where those people might be. The shorter detentions, I think even Fox News caught someone who I think was over the weekend who was being talked to by or detained at a period of time. Is there any?
Yeah. I guess I would say that we have seen over the past year a significant change in the manner and number of ICE agents and their delegates from other federal agencies moving throughout the community for enforcement, being able to make traffic stops, looking, going to houses, stopping by places where immigrants appear to be. So how does that happen? Exactly what Jelani was saying. It's based on appearance or accent. This enforcement, these are just, it's about what you look like and what you sound like. One of the things I wanted to mention in response to the how to stay safe question, Some of our colleagues at an organization called Human Rights First have developed an app that people can install on their phones. It's called Ready Now, and it is a way to do some safety planning for yourself and your family, and to set up an alert system to your lawyer and to your family and to child care providers, whoever you need to send an alert out that's pre-populated if you are being detained. That's something that I've installed myself because I need that protection as well. It's something that we're encouraging our clients and family and friends to have downloaded and installed as well, so that if detained, that's known. As Jaylani said, if a person is taken into custody by federal immigration enforcement agents, there is not a roster, a jail roster that you can quickly look at to see where a person is. There is an online detainee locator system that sometimes is updated and sometimes is not, effectively disappearing people when they are taken into custody. It's often very difficult to make contact with people or know where they are. So having that alert sent out to family or friends is something that you can do, and having that set up is something that can keep that people calm and not and know they have a plan. They probably will never have to press that button, but you've got that plan in place.
Specifically to the smaller community, though, have there been people picked up? I'm not really asking you broadly over the last year.
Yeah, at this point, I think anecdotal reports are here, but
We have, some have reached out to our
Right.
office, family members of individuals who have been picked up and are in ICE detention facilities in the state.
That means arrested by ICE.
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
And putting it in context, this is one amongst many. You know, that we are pivoting from one group to another in this, and at the moment, the spotlight is on Somali American
Did you get
community.
any sense if those people who have reached out have, if they have any criminal charges, or
No.
if for some it could just be because they're undocumented?
So far, what we know of the individuals, and obviously there's a lot we don't know, none of those individuals that we know had any criminal history. They were just going through the legal process. And, and it's possible that some of those individuals were hopeful with their process. It's hard to tell at this moment right now. And then going back to the earlier point, going to a home, a Somali home, and maybe finding one person who may be going through a legal process means that you're separating that person from the rest of their family, who are either citizens or born here. They're all citizens pretty much. So that's true to what's happening here.
And because I was over at Carmel Mall this morning, a lot of the stores are just closed down. It seems like people are maybe just scared to go out into the community. What have you been hearing?
That's true. People are concerned about activity. Things are just shock right now, and this is one of the reasons why we're here today, to kind of remind people about their rights and also remind people what they can do to stay safe. So at this moment right now, there's a lot on social media, and we want to remind folks out there, please go after information that is coming from credible sources, organizations like us, and your attorneys, and make sure you know your rights. That doesn't change. The basic facts about remaining silent and not opening the door, these are things that you can do all the time. So we know that our community is scared, and it's unfortunate because, like I said, majority of us are U.S. citizens. Some of us even born here, it's disappointing, and we know that this rhetoric and this attack against our community not only is unfair, but it's really weaponizing this fear against our community. And I think most Americans in this country, no matter what political stand you live in, they can tell that there's something wrong. And I'm going to go back to an earlier point that I mentioned in the previous press conference. I'm also interested in knowing those who are possibly benefiting from these continuous targeting of the Somali American community and the agendas that are behind that I believe are also being played. That's why it's important for us that we do not have a political football for this community. And I feel like that is how it's happening. Somali Americans are just like any other community. They have Republicans, Democrats, Green Party, Independents, and people of everything, people who switch around every year. So this idea that we are a single community with a single voice or a single monolithic view, it's absolutely wrong.
And could you talk about how, because there have been some Republican candidates, and I'm not sure what Trump has also said in the past, to maybe try and court Somali voters. What do if you talk about how you think these comments will affect?
They will
the
affect,
support of Somali-
well, the
support of
silence,
party.
the silence against the act that an individual criminal act represents an entire community and not say that that's wrong. We are a community. I think majority of Somalis are actually somewhat independent, or at least that's what I think. But that means politics in America, elections matter, and they come down to fractions of votes. So I think that's important. I think the question we need to ask ourselves is this: most of you have been reporting about these fraud cases. Why hasn't been the first story that came out this story? We were expecting that. We've seen it in the past. Our community has been targeted for everything. Whenever somebody does something, the entire community is blamed. But this is not new. This attack is not new. But for 3 years, the local GOP leaders did not do that, rightfully so. So why are all of a sudden now they're acting like that this is a Somali issue when it's not? And so those are real questions to ask them, and for them to recognize that that this is unfair. And now I'm deeply concerned for my community. We have the majority of attacks against mosques in the nation here. We are also a working class community, poor, still sending some money back home to families, working through the challenges of living. And we know that right now that we are dealing with potential recession and challenges economically. And I'm deeply concerned that this impact and some of the impacts that it'll have, even though I know my community is extremely resilient, this is unfair. And so Minnesotans need to stand up and to tell the truth. And those who are silent, I think we will know where they stand.
Jelani, we've seen and heard a lot of comments on social media that say if someone is here illegally, they should be deported. What are your thoughts on those comments?
I think the only person who can say that is a Native American. Most Native Americans have welcomed everybody. So, this idea that people are illegal is just, I think we are at a moment where if you ask most Americans, they understand what immigration is. Everyone has an immigrant story, except the forced enslavement of African Americans who didn't have a choice, and the Native American here who this is their land and this is the places that their ancestral existed. So this is the oldest debate about immigration in this country. Both Democrats and Republicans have failed this issue. You can go to a rural city in any part of America, but here in Minnesota, and you will find that the nurses are undocumented. Your factory workers are undocumented. Your grocery workers are undocumented. Those who are building those homes and putting the pipe on the floor are undocumented. But they pay taxes, and their children are growing up in an America where they have a future. And so this goes against everything who we are. President Trump is married to an immigrant, and his family also immigrated here one way or the other. So I think this is an attack to try to divide us, to win political points. And here's the thing. These rhetoric, we know how wrong they are, and they eventually will fail because they cannot sustain. And in this moment, we're going to choose love, not hate. And that's one thing we want to encourage people to do. Weaponizing ICE to target black Somali immigrants, this is not immigration policy. This is racism being directed from the president's office.
Jelani, can you speak to what outreach efforts look like for members of the community who don't speak English? And I'm just kind of curious generally how language barriers interact.
Yeah, so we have a lot of, in fact, some of that has been challenging for us. There's a lot of outlets on social media that our community trusts, Somali media and others who have historically provided continuous information engagement. We'll use those. A lot of our people are connected to us. People also even listen to national, international broadcasts like BBC and others who provide information in language. So those outlets are part of that. But what we are doing, what we have historically done, is go to the grassroots. And those are our community organizations, our mosques, and community centers that are significantly also rooted, embedded in our community. So our engagement will continue. We'll continue to remind people of not about just these information with about them protecting them on ICE, but also everything else. We also are worried about the hate on social media and some acts around that, and so we're monitoring all of that right now.
Is that like illegal or unconstitutional just to take people in if they are citizens and just to, they later have to show, like if they're not carrying their passport on themselves but they're being picked up, like is there anything wrong with that?
So U.S. immigration law has broad authority, but it's not unlimited. And one fundamental tenet of it is that the U.S. cannot deport a U.S. citizen. That is illegal. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. We know it happens because we don't always have our documents on us. We don't always know our citizenship status because we don't have a clear, fair, accessible, understandable immigration policy. We have an immigration policy that really is premised on exclusion and expulsion, not on making sure that we have fair ways and accessible ways, predictable ways for people to come here, and ways that you can correct mistakes if a clerical error happens, all of those things. For a U.S. citizen to be detained by ICE and thrown into immigration detention is going to result, I think, in civil rights claims. And I think those have been successful so far. Those take a while, of course. Lawsuits are not a remedy for the harm that's done. But certainly, anyone who is a U.S. citizen and can prove that doesn't want to spend days or weeks or months in an ICE detention center somewhere around the country while they scramble to prove that. So if people have their passport card or their enhanced ID, they're able to prove that they're a U.S. citizen. You can hopefully avoid that. That is something that's really important. People who have documentation or people who are in the process of getting documentation also are here, known to the government and going through a lawful process. And the dichotomy of who is illegal and who is not is really just a false one. There is a deportation process. If you don't have status, the government can put you in deportation proceedings, allege you're being here in violation of the law, prove that. You can raise a defense to that if there is one available to you under law. And those defenses are important. They include protection from being deported to a place where you fear persecution or torture on account of your identity. Defenses include being separated from your family if you've lived here an exceptionally long time and your deportation would cause exceptional and extremely unusual hardship to those family members. Those are important defenses, and you have to have a process that's accessible for those. We are seeing diminishment of that because of increased detention. When you are detained and moved from place to place, you don't have access to your attorney, you don't have access to your evidence, you are in a place that you don't want to be in a detention center, and it is hard to plan and mount a defense at that point. So it's very important for people right now to plan, to take a look at their own immigration status and their own immigration case. If they're in proceedings, know what their steps are. If they could be put into deportation proceedings, know what defenses they may have and get the evidence ready for that. If they don't have that, they are not going to be successful in defending against deportation, and they can and will be ordered deported. So that readiness is going to be really important to making sure people access what the law allows them to do and remain in status if they are.
Giuliani, how many undocumented Somalis roughly live in Minnesota?
It's a number we don't know. It's hard to put, but it's a very insignificant number compared to what we see in the larger other communities.
Like thousands or tens of thousands?
No,
or less?
no, not even there.
And
I know.
I know I can't hold you to a specific number, but
I think less than 1,000 for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't even think a few hundred is probably a good fair estimate.
You talked a lot about the importance of not panicking, knowing your rights. Can you talk about why that's a message you're trying to hit?
Because I think that the strategy by this administration is to create panic. We've seen that, the way that they operate, the way that they present information. And obviously right now we're having a president who is refusing to stop demonizing an entire community, some who voted for him. And it just seems to be this is the case. And naturally, people who are immigrants and even when you feel targeted, there's a sense of reaction, natural reaction people have. And one of the things is because they don't know the law, they don't understand everything, and so when you know your rights and what they can and they cannot do and how to keep yourself safe, this should calm the nerves. And also, there is a lot of sensation on social media. People are sharing old videos and new videos, and people are kind of like trying to grab this information. Some people who just want followers are trying to create false stories. People are sending wrong things to tip lines. We're hearing a lot of really just noise as part of these announcements, and so that's another part of the fear that exists. So less social media, more credible information, and most importantly, just know you have a plan, you know your rights, and I think this is critical, and make sure you check in with your immigration attorney, especially if you need that. And for the broader community, those who are like, I'm saddened, I'm disappointed, I want to help the Somali community, what can I do? Well, this is a moment for you to also know what these rights are. So you can be a voice, you can understand how to support your neighbor, how to stand up for your neighbor, and check in with your neighbor. Make sure you let them know that you're an ally, you can support them, and if you need help that they can call you. A lot of times these families and neighbors can become part of that plan that you have, that they're part of your plan to ensure that they support you. And if they know that you are someone who needs to be protected, maybe they have other tools that they could provide for you, the sanctuary states, churches, and other places that people have historically used for things like this. So this is a moment where community needs to come together, and I know we will be better off after this moment. It's because it's forcing us to actually stop and think about each other, and I hope we do that, and through that process we understand our Constitution, we understand the rights, and I think we come out of this particular moment resolved on the idea that we need to fix the immigration laws of this country. For far too long we've heard politicians claim that they're working on it. They haven't really addressed it, and I think this is the moment that we're going to need to respond in a meaningful way. All right, thank you so much for being here today.
Nice to see you in person.
I'm Jenny.
Really appreciate it.
All right, welcome back to the Live Impact News studio. There you saw the conclusion of that press conference in Minnesota, talking about immigration enforcement coming to Minnesota, specifically the Twin Cities. A report from CNN backs up that thought process. A new immigrations and custom enforcement operation, told by a federal official to CNN on Tuesday, yesterday, will specifically target undocumented Somali immigrants in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota. This community is one of the largest in the U.S., and it's one that the president has focused on directly for years. One of the few the president has focused on directly for years. At times, over the course of being in leadership positions, President Donald Trump has taken aim at the Somali community with his rhetoric, and now ICE enforcement headed to the Twin Cities with the directive, according to CNN, of targeting undocumented Somali immigrants. Now, yesterday, again, we had a press conference from the mayors of the Twin Cities voicing their support for the Somali community as a whole, and then today, that organization that advocates for civil liberties and representation, speaking about this current situation. I want to read some facts about the Somali community. These come from PBS.org. Now, there are an estimated 260,000 people of Somali descent in the United States. Between Minneapolis and St. Paul, there's about 84,000 people of Somali descent. Now, 58% of people of Somali descent in Minnesota were born in the United States. Of the foreign-born Somali residents, 89% are naturalized United States citizens. 87% are naturalized United States citizens, and many of those who are of Somali descent who came to the United States were fleeing civil war in their home country. So that is the current situation. It, of course, is one that we'll be paying attention to closely here, as we've now had multiple live events, including comments from President Trump, in which the Somali community in Minnesota has been the focus of many of those comments and press conferences. So again, a story that we likely will be revisiting at some time in the future as it continues to progress through the news cycle. Okay, now let's touch on a story that actually happened yesterday. The beginning of this story is 3:45 yesterday, so about 45 minutes after we were clear of our live Impact News afternoon stream. Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia took the Senate floor to speak to his colleagues about a very specific issue, and it's an issue that is likely close to home for Senator Tim Kaine. Senator Kaine lived in Honduras in 1980 and 1981. He also serves as the ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere. And just recently, President Donald Trump made the decision to pardon the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez. Juan Orlando Hernandez was convicted in the United States in 2024 for conspiracy to traffic more than 400 tons of cocaine and weapons charges. Again, that was in 2024, and President Donald Trump decided to pardon the former president of Honduras of these crimes just recently. Senator Kaine addressing this issue on the Senate floor. We will add that this comes in the midst of a story that's been dominating the headlines for weeks now in regards to the United States targeting and attacking small vessels in the Caribbean that they say contain narco-terrorists in an effort to stop drugs from getting into the United States. So the dichotomy of those two stories, obviously a part of this issue. Senator Tim Kaine on the Senate floor yesterday, and then we'll hear from President Trump on this issue as well once we hear from Senator Kaine. For now, let's go out to Washington, D.C.
The former president of Honduras, a country I lived in when I worked with Jesuit missionaries in 1980 and 81. In a landmark criminal prosecution, he was convicted by a jury in an American federal court of a massive conspiracy to traffic more than 400 tons of cocaine into the United States while he was president of this very poor country. Trial testimony included a witness who quoted Hernandez saying that he wanted to shove drugs right up the nose of the gringos, and they're never even going to know it. The case against Hernandez began when Donald Trump's Department of Justice prosecuted his brother Tony in 2019. During that trial and the subsequent trial of the former Honduran president in 2024, evidence showed that President Hernandez led a conspiracy to distribute cocaine in the United States, engaged in serious firearms offenses, and collected millions of dollars in bribes from some of the most dangerous criminals in the world, including Joaquin El Chapo Guzman of the Sinaloa cartel. These actions coincided with a spike in violent crime in Honduras, rendering it for a time the most dangerous nation on earth, forcing many Hondurans to leave their country, some coming to the United States. The jury that heard the 3-week-long case against the disgraced former president convicted him on multiple offenses. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison. Last Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, President Trump announced that he would pardon this notorious narco-trafficking kingpin after just 1 year serving his 45-year sentence in a federal penitentiary in West Virginia. Hernandez was released from prison yesterday. The unconscionable Hernandez pardon followed another Trump pardon of another notorious narco-trafficker. On January 21, 2025, the day after President Trump's inauguration, he pardoned Ross Ulbricht. Ulbricht was convicted in a federal court after a 4-week jury trial in 2015 of 7 serious charges stemming from his operation of a criminal enterprise known as Silk Road. Silk Road, for those not familiar, was an underground online marketplace where drug dealers and other criminals conducted more than $200 million in illegal drug trade and other unlawful activities. Albrecht was sentenced to life in prison by an American jury. President Trump is claiming to be taking action to stop the flow of narcotics into the United States. Yet these two outrageous pardons show that he is willing to excuse and free the worst narco-traffickers in the world. How does this protect Americans from the flow of narcotics entering our country? As someone who knows this region very well because of my time spent living there and my subsequent work in this body as chairman and ranking member of the Americas Subcommittee of Senate Foreign Relations, I can tell you that the decision with respect to ex-President Hernandez will severely tarnish our reputation with our regional friends and allies. Pardoning him sends a message of impunity to those involved in drug trafficking, violent crime, and corruption, which are often clear causes of irregular migration to the United States. Why pardon a crook who successfully shoved 400 tons of cocaine right up the nose of the gringos? Why pardon a criminal who established the largest underground illegal drug market in the world? How come President Trump is willing to ignore the American juries who looked at the overwhelming evidence against these narco-traffickers and convicted them? It's hard to see any reason for these pardons except that Hernandez and Albrecht are mega rich. Their bank accounts are stuffed with millions from illegal activities, which gives them the means and the motive to pump large sums of money into downtown D.C. to get out of jail. It's true that a president has expansive pardon authorities, but it's also true that American politicians have been successfully prosecuted for selling pardons. I can't say for sure what's going on here, but the pardon of Hernandez is so bizarre, so counter to the president's stated priorities, that it's difficult for me to fathom any reason why this would happen other than that someone in the administration was benefiting from it. None of it makes any logical sense. I hope that our justice system is up to the task of finding the real story behind these pardons, especially since President Trump has a track record of pardoning those who have contributed to him. Drug kingpins who become rich by profiting off the addictions of everyday Americans shouldn't be allowed to get away scot-free, and federal officials who facilitate the pardon of these individuals have to be held to account. Now, the pardon of disgraced former President Hernandez and Russ Albrecht also raised serious questions about the Trump administration's ongoing war against boats in the Caribbean and the Pacific and the threatened war against Venezuela. The president and his Secretary of Defense claim that these actions, taken without congressional authorization, are designed to stop narcotics flows into the United States. Is that the real story? Even before we get to the question of what is motivating the president to kill unknown civilians on boats and threaten to start a costly new war of choice with Venezuela, the serious legal questions about these military actions continue to multiply. The U.S. military began to strike boats in the Caribbean and Pacific on September 2nd. So far, the U.S. is engaged in more than 20 known strikes, killing at least 83 people. The first strike happened on a boat in the Caribbean on September 2nd. Based on public reporting, we now know that the initial strike killed most on board, but 2 survivors were left clinging to wreckage in the water. The U.S. Defense Department rules about war make plain that it is illegal to kill wounded survivors under these circumstances. International law commands the same. Those surviving cannot be wantonly slaughtered. And yet, acting pursuant to an alleged order from the Secretary of Defense to, quote, kill everybody, close quote, U.S. Special Forces returned to kill the 2 survivors and hid the fact from Congress and the American public for more than 2 months until enterprising journalists broke the story last week. On September 10, I led a letter with 25 Senate colleagues directly to the president, asking basic questions about the military strikes. We sought evidence that those on board the boats were combatants or narco-traffickers. We asked for the legal rationale justifying such military action without congressional approval. We inquired why the military was striking boats to kill all on board without interdicting the traffic and using the arrest of the civilians and the seizure of drugs to build criminal cases against drug kingpins. We have not yet received sufficient answers to these basic questions. The Armed Services Committee held a single class.
All right, we're going to jump out of Senator Kaine on the Senate floor just briefly. We are going to go back and allow Senator Kaine to finish his comments and allow you guys to listen to the rest of his comments. But first, we want to update on some breaking news. You see on the screen next to me here the BetMGM Casino near Maryland and Washington, D.C., the MGM National Harbor Hotel and Casino, to be exact. It is right outside of Washington, D.C., across the Potomac River from Alexandria, and I believe it's technically in Maryland. But the MGM National Harbor Hotel and Casino in that area is currently experiencing reports of a shooting reported there Wednesday afternoon. Prince George's County Fire and Rescue responded to reports around noon at the MGM in Oxon Hill. Police say they are now on the scene investigating, and they say they arrived just before noon to a shooting in the food court. They found 1 man dead and a second man with a graze wound. They have not said if the men knew the suspect. However, officials say they do not believe this is a random attack. A suspect fled the scene, and it is unclear if anyone else is in custody at this time. So an update on some breaking news at the MGM Casino up near Northern Virginia and the border of Maryland. We're getting this information from WUSA 9, one of our sister stations here at Tegna. And again, that's a shooting reported at the MGM Casino that happened Wednesday afternoon in a food court. 1 man dead and a second man with a graze wound. No information on if the men knew the suspect, but police say they do not believe that this is a random attack. The suspect fled the scene, and it's unclear if anyone is in custody at this time. So this is something that we will continue to monitor. As we get updates, we'll bring those updates to you. Again, you see there on your screen the MGM Casino up near Washington, D.C. and Maryland, not far from our viewing area here. A very popular casino indeed over on the East Coast. So any more updates come in, we'll jump back here in the studio. We'll bring you those updates. For now, let's go back to Senator Tim Kaine on the Senate floor, one of our senators right here from the Commonwealth.
I'm not allowed to discuss the facts that I learned in that briefing. But I can say the following. The briefing did not provide us with the legal rationale justifying the strikes. The briefers did not provide us with concrete information about the identity of the individuals killed or the groups targeted with the strikes. The briefers would provide no information about the policy for determining when boats would be attacked rather than interdicted. Eventually, after weeks and weeks of pressure, the administration finally allowed senators.
Okay, once again, coming out of Senator Kaine's speech on the Senate floor, because we now have a press conference happening right now outside of the MGM in Oxon Hill, Maryland, near Washington, D.C. Let's go live to that press conference.
That instances like this occur, we're confident that we'll close this case. And with that, I'll take 1 or 2 questions, but there's not really a lot more information that I can give you.
Who are you searching for right now?
We're searching for a suspect that we have on video.
What's the description for the suspect?
We're not giving that out right just yet, but if we have problems locating him, then we'll give that information.
Did you follow him from the garage, or like how far back did you
No,
track him?
the victim was in the food court. the suspect came into the food court and seemed like he knew where the victim was, and then went that way. We did, out of precautionary measure, lock down some of the local schools just till we got a handle on that the gunman was not on foot in the community, which he is not. So there's no active threat to the community, but we are actively searching for the suspect.
Chief, what did you see on the cameras? What was this? Was there an exchange, anything at all?
So I did not actually watch the cameras, but from what I was told, there was no exchange. The victim was ordering food. The suspect appeared and immediately began shooting at the victim.
Had they been there a while, though?
Or was he driven away?
We're still looking at video, but we do believe he fled the scene in a car.
Did the victim also have a weapon?
We're still determining that.
Had they been there a while, though, or were they just kind of new arrivals?
Well, I don't know how long the victim was there. We do know the suspect was in the parking lot area for a few minutes prior to going into the food court.
What can you tell us about the decision to keep the casino open, to keep MGM open? For all intents and purposes, there's not a heavy police presence inside MGM.
So for us, the decision to keep MGM open, MGM is such a big area that the only crime scene that we're looking at right now is in the food court. So for us, as a police department, there's no need for us to close anything else. Everything that we need to gather is in that food court. So we're satisfied with just closing down that area.
So every each of that place is on camera. How much does it help your investigation with their cameras?
The cameras are absolutely helpful. So any business or community, when they have a crime on camera, it not only helps us expedite the investigation, but it also helps us in the prosecution of the case and holding people accountable. And
so you can track every second of the movement of these people in here, correct?
Primarily, we believe that, yes.
Any word on a motive, sir? What there may have been some kind of beef between these two individuals?
Nothing yet. Like we said, there was nothing that occurred inside MGM where these two individuals encountered one another until the shooting occurred. And I'll take one more question.
Was the victim in the casino beforehand?
That we don't know. Still under review.
You can confirm nobody else was hurt or
grazed otherwise?
Yes, we can confirm that.
Someone was grazed.
No, we can confirm that no one else was injured.
Is the victim by himself, herself?
Yes. Male.
What can you tell us about the security in place in the food court area?
That you would have to probably ask MGM what security is in place, Prince George's County Police. We do patrol MGM, parking lot, casino, food court area, like we patrol everywhere else within Prince George's County.
A message to the community. Some people say, they're seeing more young people show up here at the casino. Maybe concerned now.
We haven't seen more young people show up at the casino, but MGM is safe. The harbor is safe. This was a targeted incident. We believe that it would have folded out anywhere once these two individuals came into the same area. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Brian, anything more today? No. And are we okay with MGM to be here?
Yes.
Okay, back here in the Live Impact studio. You got quite a bit from that press conference. It seemed like it might end rather early, but we were able to actually hear a good amount of information from the representative there. So what do we know? They're still searching for a suspect, but it is a suspect that they have on video. The victim was ordering food. The suspect appeared. There was no exchange between the victim and the suspect inside the casino before the incident occurred. And the MGM is still open. Everything needed by police, by investigators, is in the food court. The rest of the MGM is still open. They've got nothing on a motive yet. They re-emphasized that there was no exchange between the victim and the suspect inside the casino. And they believe this was a targeted incident and that it could have happened anywhere that these two individuals came into contact with each other, according to police. That is what they believe at this time. And we, again, are reporting on a shooting that occurred at the MGM National Harbor Hotel and Casino in the food court at that casino. Now, let's take a look at the map here so we can get a sense of where this casino is. Naya, if you don't mind zooming out a little bit, it is technically in Maryland, technically in Oxon Hill, Maryland. However, that is the Potomac River just there to the left of our red marker there. And so obviously Washington, D.C., not far from that MGM casino. Washington, D.C., if you scroll in just a touch, Naya, you see Arlington there, and there you see Washington, D.C., just north of the MGM, which technically is within the borders of Maryland in Oxon Hill, Maryland. So that is the MGM Harbor Hotel and Casino, a Wednesday afternoon shooting at the food court in the casino. But again, the MGM remains open. Police say everything that occurred, everything they need to investigate happened within the food court. And they're still searching for a suspect, but it is a suspect that they have on video. And they believe this to be a targeted incident, not a random attack. So that is your update right now on everything happening at the MGM National Harbor Hotel and Casino. Again, a situation, if there's another press conference, if there are more updates, we will bring them to you as soon as they come across our desk, and we will continue to check in on this story throughout the stream, regardless of whether there are updates or not. We will kind of refresh this story as we go. Again, not far from our viewing area, up there in Northern Virginia, right on the border of Maryland, this MGM National Harbor Hotel and Casino. Right next to the Potomac River there. Okay. Now, for once again, we know Senator Kaine has been interrupted quite a few times. Let's get back to Senator Kaine. A brief refresher. Apologies for those of you who were here when we kind of gave this foundational information the first time. Senator Kaine is speaking about President Trump's decision to pardon the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez. Former President Hernandez was convicted in 2024 in the United States for conspiring to traffic more than 400 tons of cocaine and weapons charges. He has now been pardoned by President Donald Trump. Senator Kaine, who lived in Honduras in 1980 and 1981, is now speaking about this issue on the Senate floor. Well, actually, this happened yesterday afternoon around 3:45 p.m., but we're playing the recording for you here from Senator Kaine. Let's listen in once more. We apologize for the interruptions as other breaking news came across our desk. Here's Senator Kaine.
We asked for the legal rationale justifying such military action without congressional approval. We inquired why the military was striking boats to kill all on board without interdicting the traffic and using the arrest of the civilians and the seizure of drugs to build criminal cases against drug kingpins. We have not yet received sufficient answers to these basic questions. The Armed Services Committee held a single classified briefing with administration officials on October 1. As a member of the committee, I attended the briefing. I'm not allowed to discuss the facts that I learned in that briefing, but I can say the following. The briefing did not provide us with the legal rationale justifying the strikes. The briefers did not provide us with concrete information about the identity of the individuals killed or the groups targeted with the strikes. The briefers would provide no information about the policy for determining when boats would be attacked rather than interdicted. Eventually, after weeks and weeks of pressure, the administration finally allowed senators to read in the SCIF the classified legal rationale it prepared to justify these military actions. By the time senators charged with overseeing military operations and providing the budget for national defense were allowed to review the legal rationale, the strikes had been underway for nearly 2 months. I've reviewed the legal rationale, but because the administration continues to call it classified, I'm not allowed to disclose its contents. But I can say the following. The legal rationale is weak. It misinterprets and misuses historical materials regarding the Constitution's allocation of war powers. Its analysis of the domestic law allowing presidential action is flimsy and would essentially repeal the careful language used in the Constitution and further clarified in the War Powers Act, vesting Congress, the Article I branch, with the power to initiate war. And its analysis of international law justifying these military strikes is frankly embarrassing. I can also say this. Nothing in the rationale that senators can read in a classified setting would allow any military action against the nation of Venezuela. The dangerous nature of the administration's legal rationale and strategy are magnified by a series of events that have happened in the last 3 months. Before the strikes even began, public reporting has it that the senior judge advocate general, the chief legal officer in Southcom, raised serious concerns about the legality of these strikes in August. On October 1, when the Department of Defense briefed the Senate Armed Services Committee about these strikes, they neglected to bring any uniformed officers or personnel from Southcom to the briefing. This fact was an immediate red flag and tip-off that there was deep division within the ranks about the legality of this current military operation. On October 16, the military struck a vessel and recovered 2 survivors. The survivors were then returned to their homes in Colombia and Ecuador and released. Well, wait a minute. If they were narco-traffickers, why weren't they arrested and prosecuted? If they weren't narco-traffickers, was a mistake made? Were mistakes made in the other strikes? Were they innocent of wrongdoing? Was the case against them so flimsy that it wouldn't stand up in a court, and that's why they were not arrested but instead released in their home countries? The administration's refusal to share any information about who has been killed, paired with the lack of prosecution of these 2 individuals, raises serious concerns over exactly who is being killed and why. In mid-October, Southcom Commander Admiral Bull Halsey announced his premature retirement from the military. A posting to be head of Southcom would normally go for 3 years. Admiral Halsey was confirmed less than a year ago, and he announced that he was prematurely retiring at the peak of his career, 3-star admiral, being given command of this important COCOM. Reporting suggests that the retirement followed tense argument between Admiral Halsey, Secretary Hegseth, and Chairman Dan Kane over the legality of these military strikes. At around the same time, the Pentagon announced that the operational responsibility for the military strikes was being transferred from Southcom, where their chief legal officer and apparently their commander had raised questions about legality of killing civilians on open seas. The responsibility was being transferred from Southcom to the Special Operations Command. My read of that shift, together with the other evidence about the JAG opinion in Southcom and the premature retirement of the Southcom commander, is that it signifies a deep concern within the Pentagon leadership over the legality of the ongoing military action. On November 11, we learned that one of our closest allies, the United Kingdom, was restricting traditional information sharing with the United States in Southcom area due to its concerns about the legality of the U.S. military actions. The UK has fought alongside us in Iraq, Afghanistan, and all over the world, but they are not participating in intelligence sharing on this particular American military mission. Just last week, we learned that the first strike left survivors who were then killed on orders from Secretary Hegseth. The U.S. has, in the past, prosecuted such actions as war crimes, beginning with the Nuremberg trials and heading forward into the current era. Over the weekend, President Trump announced that he was closing Venezuelan airspace. Where is his authority to close the airspace over a sovereign nation? Did the Pentagon even know that he would announce such a policy via his social media account? Do we even know the airspace has been closed or whether any flights are still occurring? And most recently, our Secretary of Defense, who likes to cosplay by giving himself the fake title, Secretary of War, posted an image on Twitter of Franklin the Turtle firing missiles at narco-terrorists. Pete Hegseth's social media account for your Christmas wish list: Franklin targets narco-terrorists. This is the Secretary of Defense, folks, of the greatest nation on earth. And to him, this thing's just a big joke. Think about that. America's Secretary of Defense has enough time on his hands that he and his minions get to come up with cartoon memes to make light of the fact that the United States is killing people in international waters. He's spending his time and energy thinking about cartoons rather than keeping us safe. And I just have to ask this. I was intrigued at this particular detail. There's a great biblical phrase that says, from the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. So something that you're feeling inside tends to come outside of your mouth, even if it's somewhat unintentional. Why Franklin? I mean, if you're going to do a cartoon, like Franklin is a Canadian cartoon. Why not Scooby-Doo or Peanuts or, Snoopy? I mean, why Franklin? Of all the cartoon figures that Pete Hegseth could spend time imagining into an AI-generated cartoon making fun of killing narco, why Franklin? Well, I don't know the answer to that. Secretary Hegseth does, but I have an intuition. Check and see the name of the Special Forces commander who Secretary Hegseth is now trying to blame for the second strike killing struggling civilians in international waters. This is no way to wage war. This is no way to wage war. Orders of dubious legality offered by civilian leaders of questionable judgment are leading to dozens of anonymous deaths, division within the U.S. military, and tension with our allies. And the administration's actions are risking the careers of officers and troops, many having served for decades with great distinction, who face the life and death question of whether to obey a superior or follow the law, follow the clear law. All this is occurring with an administration hell-bent on hiding from Congress and the American public the actual facts, strategy, and legal justification for its actions. America is not supposed to be at war based on a presidential say-so. Abraham Lincoln said it well when he was a member of Congress in 1848. The reason why the Constitution has given the war-making power to Congress was because kings have always been involving and impoverishing their people in wars. This, our Constitutional Convention understood to be the most oppressive of all kingly oppressions. And they resolve to so frame the Constitution that no one man should hold the power of bringing this oppression upon us. No one man should hold the power of bringing this oppression upon us. It is past time for Congress to reclaim its role in the decision on whether to initiate war. The framers in 1787 wouldn't allow George Washington to make these decisions on his own. We shouldn't allow our current president, a man perfectly comfortable pardoning a convicted criminal who boasted about shoving drugs up the gringos' noses, to make such a decision on his own. It's time for Congress to reassert the role that was handed to us in a sacred way in the Constitution in 1787 and exercise oversight over this mushrooming military operation in the Americas. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.
All right, back here in the Live Impact News studio, we're monitoring 2 live events right now as we speak. A brief description of what we may be able to get to on the stream pending when they begin. At the top of your screen, we have a Senate appropriations hearing on Russian abduction of Ukrainian children. On the bottom of your screen, House Democrats holding a news conference on immigrant rights. As you can see, neither of them has begun yet. So we continue along with our story about the former president of Honduras being pardoned for conspiracy to traffic 400 tons of cocaine pardoned by President Trump. We just heard from Senator Kaine on that story. Now let's hear from President Trump himself. This soundbite from Trump came on Sunday. It looks like he's aboard Air Force One based on the image we have here. But nonetheless, here's President Trump on his decision to pardon the former president of Honduras.
Any questions? We had some great economic numbers come out. As you know, we're doing very well economically. A lot of factories are being built all over the country and all of that, but very strong numbers came out. Go ahead.
Can you give us an update on what took place in South Florida today, those talks between the U.S. and the Ukrainians?
Well, they're going along, and they're going along well. We want to stop people from being killed. Doesn't have much to do with us, but I'd like to see if we can save a lot of souls. A lot of people are being killed. Last month, we had 27,000 people killed in that ridiculous war that should have never happened. It would have never happened if I were president.
Have you spoken with Rubio and Witkoff since then?
I have, yeah. I've spoken to them, and they're doing well. Ukraine's got some difficult little problems. They have some difficult problems, but I think Russia would like to see it end, and I know Ukraine would like to see it end.
You just said that Ukraine has a little bit of problems.
Well, we have a corruption situation going on, which is not helpful.
And is that impeding the peace talks?
Well, I said it was going on for 3 years, right? Didn't I say it? For 3 years I said it, so I was way ahead of schedule. But I think that there's a good chance we can make a deal.
Mr. President, on Venezuela, can you tell us more about why the airspace above Venezuela should be considered closed?
Because we consider Venezuela to be not a very friendly country. They sent millions of people, really, and probably a number in excess of that. And a lot of those people shouldn't be in our country, from jails, from gangs, from drug dealers, from all of the people that came into our country shouldn't have been in our country, causing a lot of problems.
Does your warning
and drugs.
Does your warning mean that an airstrike is imminent, or should we not read it that way?
Don't read anything into it.
The New York Times reported that you had a phone call with Maduro. Did you?
I don't want to comment on it. The answer is yes.
And can you tell us a little bit
No,
about
I can't
it?
do that.
Mr. President,
Would you say it went well?
I wouldn't say it went well or badly. It was a phone call. Yeah.
You've made so.
Can you talk a little bit about the strikes and the controversy around Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth?
I don't know anything about it. He said he did not say that, and I believe him 100%.
You don't know if there was
You're talking about the two men?
The second strike to kill the two men.
No, he said he didn't do it. He said he never said
Would
that.
you be okay with that if he did?
He said he didn't do it, so I don't have to make that decision.
Mr. You've made so clear how you want to keep drugs out of the U.S.
Right.
Can you explain more about why you would pardon a notorious drug trafficker?
Well, I don't know who you're talking about. Which
Juan
one?
Orlando Hernandez.
Well, I was asked by Honduras, many of the people of Honduras, they said it was a Biden setup. I don't mean Biden. Look, Biden didn't know he was alive, but it was the people that surround the Resolute desk, surround Biden when he was there, which was about very little time. And the people of Honduras really thought he was set up, and it was a terrible thing. He was the president of the country, and they basically said he was a drug dealer because he was the president of the country. And they said it was a Biden administration setup, and I looked at the facts and I agreed with them.
What evidence did you share that he was set up and that he wasn't?
Well, you take a look. I mean, they could say that you take any country you want. If somebody sells drugs in that country, that doesn't mean you arrest the president and put him in jail for the rest of his life. And that includes this country, okay? To be honest, I mean, if somebody does something wrong, do you put the president of the country in jail? They said it was a Biden setup. It was a Biden administration setup. And you have a big race going on this week, next week. I think it's going to be a very important race. It'll be interesting to see Honduras. That's what you're talking about, right?
Correct, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Exactly is Steve Witkoff going to Moscow, and do you want to extend Putin some sort of deadline for the...
Well, what is the second part of your question?
Do you want, like, to tell Putin, here is my deadline for you to...
No, I don't have it.
Okay, so that was President Donald Trump speaking about the situation with his pardon of the former president of Honduras. So we want to add more context even because White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt did answer questions about this yesterday during her White House press briefing. Let me double check. I'm sorry, this was on Monday during the White House press briefing, but it is still on the subject of the pardon for the former president of Honduras. So we want to play that soundbite as well. And then we will move on to other stories happening live as we speak. But just to wrap up this story on the pardon of the former president of Honduras.
The people of Honduras have highlighted to him how the former President Hernandez was set up. This was a clear Biden over prosecution. He was the president of this country. He was in the opposition party. He was opposed to the values of the previous administration, and they charged him because he was president of Honduras. There were some other egregious facts that came out during this trial, and I would encourage you to report on them. His court-appointed lawyer was only given 3 weeks to prepare for trial. He shared that his conviction was lawfare by the leftist party, who, quote, struck a deal with the Biden-Harris administration. Hernandez has highlighted there was virtually no independent evidence presented, and many of his conviction was based on testimony from many admitted criminals who hoped that cooperating would reduce their own penalties. President Trump has been quite clear in his defense of the United States homeland to stop these illegal narcotics from coming to our borders, whether that's by land or by sea. And he's also made it quite clear that he wants to correct the wrongs of the weaponized Justice Department under the previous administration.
Okay, so there it was, our final comment on this story. We heard from Senator Tim Kaine at length on the Senate floor. We heard President Donald Trump answering questions, and we heard Caroline Leavitt with a statement at the White House press briefing, all in regards to the pardon of the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, convicted in 2024 in the United States for conspiracy to traffic more than 400 tons of cocaine and weapons charges, pardoned by President Donald Trump. And if there are more updates to come in this story, we will continue to bring them to you, including anything from our own Virginia Senator Tim Kaine on this topic. Okay, now we mentioned the live events that we have happening right now. The the Democratic Party holding a news conference on immigrant rights has not begun yet. However, the Senate Appropriations hearing on the Russian abduction of Ukrainian children has in fact begun. So we're going to head live out now to that Appropriations Committee hearing. Before we do, just a bit of context. We know that Steve Witkoff, a part of the envoy that is looking to create peace between Russia and Ukraine, that is presenting peace deals to the parties, along with President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, met with Vladimir Putin yesterday. No peace deal came out of that meeting, but they did meet yesterday. So that is where the conflict stands as we speak. For now, let's go out to the Appropriations Committee discussing the Russian abduction of Ukrainian children.
Can move forward on that soon, and I hope we can find a way to end this bloodbath, but we got to do it right. So we're trying to provide as much visibility as we can to our European friends. Do what we're doing. In hand. Let's try to find a way to put maximum pressure on Putin's Russia to account for each and every child. Every parliament in Europe should be doing what we're doing. Everybody should be having hearings. And so we don't have a minute to delay. Senator Schott's been great to work with. This whole committee has been great to work with. We'll do his opening statement. We'll introduce our first panel, and thank you all.
Thank you very much, Chairman Graham, for convening this hearing and for your leadership on this critical issue. The systematic abduction of Ukrainian children by the Russian government is a horrific tragedy for the thousands of families victimized by Putin, but it's also an issue of global concern. Here in the Senate, colleagues on both sides of the aisle have been working to support efforts to track and return children and hold perpetrators accountable. That vital work continues, and I hope today's discussion adds to those efforts. But let me reiterate something that the chairman said. Any peace plan that lets Putin walk away from this war, having illegally seized Ukrainian territory, kidnapped thousands of Ukrainian children, and caused the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people on both sides with no consequences is unacceptable. It would set a very dangerous precedent for the world, not to mention undermine future peace in the region. It is disappointing that the State Department declined to participate in today's hearing, but I hope that the administration will be briefing us about these talks very soon. As I noted, there has been a bipartisan effort to address Russia's mass abduction of Ukrainian children. And yet earlier this year, the Trump administration abruptly ended a contract which jeopardized the work to get critical data, including on abducted children, to the Ukrainian government and European law enforcement. It is one of the many instances where the administration has eliminated, undermined, or disregarded bipartisan priorities that are under the purview of this subcommittee, and why it's so important that we negotiate and enact a bipartisan state and foreign ops bill for the next fiscal year. The bill is critical for protecting American interests through targeted security and economic assistance for key allies and partners like Ukraine. And to do that well, the bill needs to restore transparency, strengthen the State Department's workforce, meet our international commitments, and ensure compliance with the law. We shouldn't have to wonder whether funds are being spent as we intended, or hear secondhand that critical efforts that we all supported are gone. For today, I'm interested in hearing from our witnesses about what's required to return, reintegrate, and rehabilitate Ukrainian children, and how we can best help. I'm also interested in how we can support law enforcement efforts, including national prosecutors and courts, as well as the ICC, which has indicted Putin for war crimes associated with the abduction of these children. I want to thank our witnesses today for their testimony, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Chairman Collins, would you, thank you for coming. Would you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to commend you and the ranking member for shining a spotlight on a truly horrendous problem. And I am happy to work with you in any way to send the strongest possible signal to President Putin, to Russia, that this is simply so wrong. It is a war crime. It is something that simply cannot be allowed to continue. So thank you very much for your leadership and that of our witnesses today.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Our first panel are our colleagues, two from the House, two from the Senate. Republicans and Democrats who have been deeply involved in this issue and every other issue related to Putin's war on Ukraine. And I thought it would be good to hear from you because you've been leading on so many ways. And Senator Blumenthal, we've had a great relationship over this issue, and it's now time to get some bills passed. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you very much, Chairman Graham. I've been to Ukraine 8 times since the beginning of this war. Most of those trips with you, Mr. Chairman, some long overnight train rides, and first and foremost, thank you for your leadership, which has been truly historic, without any exaggeration, on this issue. I also want to thank my colleague, Senator Klobuchar, for her leadership, which has been really instrumental, and our House colleagues who are here. Thank you, and to the witnesses who will literally testify as to the inhumanity and the criminality that we see unfolding in the kidnapping of these children. It's more than a war crime. It is literally genocide. It is genocide because the ultimate goal of abducting these children is to erase the Ukrainian identity. It is part of a strategic effort to erase the nation of Ukraine from existence. And Putin tried it by conquering territory. He continues that effort. And the attempted negotiations now ongoing in Moscow, we wish them well, but there's no sign of clear progress, and therefore we need to move forward with our sanctions bill, with the designation of Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, as well as an effort to use the seized assets. I've witnessed firsthand the courage of the Ukrainian people and the brutal toll of Putin's assault, the bombing and missiles that are designed, again, to erase Ukraine and damage the people of Ukraine directly without any regard to the rules of war. And I have spoken to those, some of them, Ukrainian children who have been taken hostage. Of all the moments in my life of this privilege of public service, which we all have, this one will stay with me forever, talking to children about how they were declared orphans because the Russians killed their parents, or simply abducted by Russian soldiers. I cannot describe to you the absolute brutality and inhumanity with which they were treated. 10-month-old Margarit Prokopenko, who was kidnapped by Russians under the false pretense of medical examination and rehabilitation. Her name and citizenship were changed, and her birthplace was altered from Kherson, Ukraine, to Podolsk, Russia. In another case, 16-year-old Artem, forcibly taken by Russian soldiers to an orphanage where he said he slept, quote, on sagging metal beds, no bedding, just blankets, terrible sanitation. Every day we ate barley stew, strange compote, and crackers, end quote. 9-year-old Ilya lived with his mother in Mariupol when the war began. Quote, I love my school and my friends, he said. We had a beautiful home. His mother was killed in a Russian missile strike. He buried her in their backyard. He was transferred to a hospital in Donetsk where he underwent surgery without anesthesia and was told by Russian doctors that he shouldn't say glory to Ukraine anymore. Those are just a few of the stories. Having talked to some of these children, I think the people of the United States should know about these atrocities, war crimes, genocide, as part of a systematic, deliberate effort to indoctrinate the children of Ukraine with pro-Russian ideologies and to delegitimize and deny their national identity. I was proud to join you, Mr. Chairman, along with Senator Britt and Senator Klobuchar in introducing this legislation earlier this year that would designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, part of a very exclusive club, well earned by Russia and Vladimir Putin. And I want to thank all the members of the United States Senate. I hope all the members. I challenge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to vote for this measure. And if you are in possession of an ounce of humanity, you will support this measure enthusiastically. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. You made me aware of this issue. I appreciate it. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Senator Schatz for leading this powerful subcommittee of people that have been leaders on this issue. You couldn't think of a better time for this hearing as these negotiations are ongoing, and we must stand with Ukraine, and I appreciated both of your words. So I recently returned from Rome, where 12 days ago I had the honor of joining the Ukrainian delegation sent by President Zelensky to meet with Pope Leo at the Vatican. I was there alongside Maxime, who will testify today. And it's one thing to have the numbers that we all use about the number of kids that are over there, some of them as old as teenagers, some of them as young as 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old. It's another to actually sit across the table from them and their families. I met Sashko, who was taken from his home in Mariupol after being wounded in a Russian bombardment. At our breakfast, he was there with his brave grandma, Ludmila, who told me she eventually took matters into her own hands, this grandma, when he was able to get a cell phone and call her, and she went into the occupied territory to rescue him. With the Pope, I stood next to Veronica, who was confined in Russia against her will for both her 13th and her 14th birthdays, including periods of time in isolation before she managed to escape. These are tragic stories of childhoods forever changed by brutality, but they are also stories of resilience and hope, the stories of the Ukrainian people who, against all odds, have continued to stand up to the brutality of Vladimir Putin. Veronica is attending school again in Kyiv, now in the 11th grade, and to see her big smile when she met the Pope and the tears coming out of her eyes as he gave her a rosary is something I will never forget. More than 1,800 children have been returned, some with the help of the Vatican, and we were there to urge the Pope to use his standing and strong moral authority in the world to help return more children through mediation. I believe the Pope plays a critical role, but in the end, children should never be pawns in a war. And that is why Senator Britt and I joined you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Blumenthal on this important bill. But we must know, as you will hear today, how the kids are being moved in Russia through 200 sites, thanks to the incredible detective work of Yale researchers led by Nathaniel Raymond, who will testify today. His team has tracked the movements with biometrics and the like of some kids that don't even look like they looked when they were abducted because they were only babies. In addition to this important legislation that you're talking about today that I hope advances to the Senate, Senator Shaheen and I were just discussing this. Senator Grassley and I have a bill that we thank all of you for supporting in the NDAA. That bill would authorize our federal agencies to continue supporting these tracking efforts. I want to thank Representative Fitzpatrick for co-leading the bipartisan companion legislation in the House and Representative McCall for leading a related resolution. The U.S. is not alone in assisting Ukraine with the tracking and recovery of our children. Our allies are stepping up, and in September, President Zelensky announced a new initiative among several countries to share data and build up the capacity of Ukraine's own law enforcement. We all must do our part, and I'm pleased that First Lady Melania Trump joined us in this effort. But in the end, if we just sell out on some kind of an agreement that not only doesn't bring the kids home, but literally gives Russia territory that they don't even have right now, that's the message we're going to send to the world. So, Chairman Graham, I want to thank you for at this really important time having this hearing, and let's get these kids home. Thank you.
To show how important this is, we allowed members of the House to come to the Senate. Michael? You're up.
Well, Chairman, it's great to be in the House of Lords, the upper chamber. It took a while to walk over here. But I do want to thank you and the ranking member, Schatz, for holding this important hearing and having us from the House who care about this issue deeply. And we've been following this for quite some time. And you're putting a spotlight on this. And I can't say thank you enough. And I agree with you. In these peace talks that are going on right now, Russia needs to understand these children must come home. They must be repatriated with their families. We need an ironclad security agreement, unlike the '94 Budapest Agreement that didn't have that. And as I passed the wartime supplemental in the House, passed by the Senate, Russia needs to pay for its own crimes in the Repo Act. I met with the Ukraine ambassador yesterday, showed me a video that Save Ukraine put together featuring these children and describing the Russian atrocities. The Russian Federation has abducted at least 20,000 children that we know of, and every expert I've talked to believes the number's higher, much higher than that. They are also indoctrinating and militarizing Ukrainian children in the occupied territories, possibly up to 1 million. According to the video, Russia has allocated $7 billion in its 26-28 budget for a national project titled Youth and Children, essentially militarized youth organizations. The ambassador told me again that 1 million children live in the occupied territories, vulnerable to brainwashing and abuse, and more than 43,000 have already enrolled in Russia's paramilitary youth program. And I think really most frightening to me is in these territories, the textbooks spew false information and conspiracy theories about NATO and the free world. All this is part of Russia's effort to turn future generations against Ukraine, the United States, and Europe, because in their words, they are preparing for a large-scale war against NATO. It will not end at Donbass and the land bridge to Crimea. We have to be clear-eyed in these negotiations. Some of these children's parents are have been threatened in giving up their kids. They're shipped to Russia, stripped of their identities, tortured, forced to memorize propaganda, and told their country and their own families are the enemy. Finally, many of them were sent to the front lines of the Russian war itself. Imagine a child age 16 being sent to the front lines to fight against their own homeland. And Mr. Chairman, in the documentary Children in the Fire, I'd recommend everybody watch this. They show a child in a prison where adults use electrodes to shock them under their fingernails and genitals. And I hate to even say that in public, but it is so horrific. No child should ever have to endure that kind of barbarism. And to me, it's good versus evil, and this is evil in its purest form. And like the chairman, I've met with a lot of these survivors. I've met with many of them who were sent to Russian camps, and they described the forced indoctrination and the torture. As a father of 5, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, I can't imagine any of my children being kidnapped and indoctrinated against the United States of America. And imagine how Americans would feel if that happened to them. I'm thankful, Chairman Graham, for your leadership, calling attention to this important issue. And I agree that any peace must include the repatriation of these children, and it must include the ironclad security agreement. We cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. Unfortunately, the reporting I'm seeing out of Moscow shows Ukraine making concessions while Putin has made none. That is no surprise. I think he will drag this out. He will continue his behavior, including the kidnapping and abuse of the children, until pressure is placed on him and he's forced to be stopped. We must hold those responsible accountable and ensure this ends not only for Ukraine's sake, but for our own sake and for the world. Russia's attempt to re-engineer an entire generation is a battle plan. In their words, they are preparing children for war against NATO. This is a national security imperative, and beyond that, it's a moral imperative. And this is a time, all of us on both sides of the aisle, for moral clarity, because history will judge us by what we do here and now. And it will judge us how we respond today. So, again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this important hearing. I look forward to working with you in this committee.
Thank you. Congressman Fitzpatrick.
Thank the chair and the ranking member, and to all of our Senate colleagues for allowing Mike and I to come here today. No matter what path any of us have taken here, whether we're here in an elected capacity, the media, advocates, supporters, I think we can all agree on one thing, and that is none of us have any higher responsibility in any aspect of our lives than to take care of our kids. That is our single most important responsibility that we have as human beings. And as we sit here today, there are close to 20,000 Ukrainian children who are living in fear, living in uncertainty, that are relying on us, people who have a position of authority, to not forget them, and not just to not forget them, but to make sure we do everything in our power, everything in our capacity to bring them home to their families. And there's nothing accidental about Russia's abduction of these Ukrainian children. This is not a byproduct of war. It's a calculated decision by Vladimir Putin. It is state-directed, and it is one of the clearest perpetuations of terror that this war has seen. Since February of 2022, Ukrainian authorities, as was pointed out by Senator Graham, documented at a bare minimum 19,546 children. Every single one of those children have a name. Every single one of those children have dreams. They all have families that they love. And as we sit here today, they are living in fear. And they've been forcibly taken from their families, transported to Russian custody or Russian-occupied territories. These abductions are not random. They're not isolated. They are part of a deliberate effort that is specifically designed to do what Vladimir Putin has said he was going to do for years, to destroy Ukraine by erasing their culture and erasing their next generation of young Ukrainians. Silence in the face of such deliberate evil can never be an option for any of us. We have a responsibility and, more importantly, a moral obligation as human beings to make sure we take action here. And that begins with sending the following message to the Russian Federation. If you continue to kidnap Ukraine's children, and if you refuse to return every single last one of them home, you will bear the full weight of being recognized for what you have become, which is a state sponsor of terror. The bipartisan bill put forth by Senator Graham and several of his colleagues is a necessary first step, but it certainly cannot be the last. Congress can and must come together without further delay to sanction every single element of Vladimir Putin's regime. Every official, every institution, every entity complicit in Russia's assault against Ukraine must be held to account. And moreover, our adversaries must also be put on notice that if you enable the abduction of Ukraine's children or bankroll the slaughter of innocent Ukrainian civilians, the United States will hold you accountable. I want to thank Ukraine's ambassador to the United States for her partnership, for highlighting the urgency of this issue, of the staggering disregard in which Russia has for its human rights. And Mr. Chair, Mr. Ranking Member, we are reliving some of the most horrific parts of history, things that we thought were permanently relegated to the history books. When Germany invaded Poland September 1st of 1939, there were a lot of officials throughout the world that said it's a regional conflict. We don't want to provoke. We don't want to escalate. And what has history taught us? That a problem that could have been nipped in the bud early, because it was not, turned out to be the costliest and deadliest war in world history, where we had to send our own children to die on Omaha Beach. Those are the lessons of history. The decisions of Neville Chamberlain and the decisions of his successor, Winston Churchill, vastly different approaches that led to vastly different outcomes. And yet here we are today having that very same debate when history has already answered this question for us. When it comes to democracies standing up against dictators, there are two choices. There are two options. There's peace through strength and there's war through weakness. There is no magical third option. And history has recorded the decisions of our predecessors. History will now record our decisions and our actions here today. So let's make sure that we make the next generation that's reading about our actions here today proud of the decisions we made. And that starts with standing up for every single last Ukrainian child that's been abducted, never letting them leave our mind for 1 second, and work tirelessly and insist that every last one of them come home to their families. I yield back.
Thank you all for testifying. I know you've got a lot to do. We'll have the second panel. Senator Britt's been mentioned a couple of times. She's the original co-sponsor of this legislation with Senator Blumenthal and Klobuchar to make Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. So if you want to.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you and the ranking member holding this hearing. I hope that this goes to the heart of every parent across our nation. Everyone. I mean, think about your child being ripped from your arms. Think about not knowing where your kids are on their birthday or milestones or tragic experiences. You've just heard Senator Blumenthal, Senator Klobuchar, others talk about torture, talk about having to undergo surgery with no anesthesia, talk about having to denounce everything they know and love, terrified, miles and miles away from their own parents. Look, I think allowing this to occur as a nation, it goes against the very fabric of who we are as a country. Think about that. And look, I join you in asking our European allies to step up and to do the very same thing that we're doing today. But we are here today because America must do something. And you cannot be a great nation if you are unwilling to do good. And there is no doubt that these kids need us. They need us to raise our voice. I want to thank the First Lady for her tireless effort on this. Senator Graham, I want to thank you, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Klobuchar. Stand with you in bringing every one of these kids home and appreciate this. And I think we have a moral obligation to keep this going until we get every last one of them back into their parents' arms.
Well, thank you. Well said by all. We got 2 votes. We'll come back we'll try to vote at the beginning of the second vote. And our second panel, we'll hear from y'all.
All right, back here in the Live Impact News studio where that appropriations hearing ongoing on the Russian abduction of Ukrainian children. You heard from multiple elected officials there. Elsewhere in Washington, D.C., House Democrats with a news conference on immigrant rights. Let's head live out to Washington, D.C. now to listen in. More elected officials speaking about one of the top stories of the day.
Of a mother, and they would call that, hey father, a tree fall in our yard, what should we do? And father would say that try hard, take help of neighbor and all these things. Everybody had same stories, and people were, I didn't find, although I was put in a very high security setup, but they were all normal people. I didn't find anything wrong in them. they were just playing their normal games, talking to their family. Every day they would talk to their family, they would make video call. It was such a tough thing that these men were the one who were the breadwinners in the family, and now they are not doing their job. Their families are just asking for money here and there. The food we were getting in this detention center was extremely bad, so everybody was dependent on this because it was a for-profit industry. They were dependent on these commissaries. They have to do their shopping there, and for that they have to request money from their families. It would have been a very hard story for everyone to get that money because it has to be for every week, every day. So things were really, people were breaking down, and these men, when they were outside, they were paying taxes. They were not a burden to a society. There was a man who had, say, X number of kids. It was a big number, that's why I'm saying X. So he would say that, who would give food to my kids now? My wife never worked. I used to keep her as a princess, as a queen. And he used to cry. And there were many others who used to cry, and people were frustrated. They would share stories that, my kids have sent these drawings and paintings to me, but he's not doing well at school. He's getting bad grades because I used to take care of my kid. My wife is now doing job outside. There is no one at home. This man was, say, an immigrant, but his wife was an American citizen. Kids were American citizens. Everybody is suffering now. Those bare minimum is missing. One parent is figuring out to take care of their mortgages, their groceries, and kids are on their own, and they are getting bad grades. Who are these kids? American citizens. So I request everyone to think that it is not something like we are dealing of aliens who have come from Mars or something. This is about humans. America was built on immigrants. Immigrants built this country. There should be due process. Nobody can reject it. Nobody should dare to think that one can reject it. There is free speech. And we should really think that when we think about these detainees who are just fellow humans, if they are not citizens here, they are spouses of the citizens. They are parents of citizens. So I'm extremely, to cut it short, extremely thankful to Congresswoman to do this remarkable job, and we are extremely proud of this, and we know that this institution will always make justice for everything. Thank you very much.
So powerful. Thank you so much, Dr. Suri, and thank you for sharing the universal lack of humanity that is present in these detention centers. Our final, but certainly not least speaker, has been working on this issue in every capacity for many, many years. We are so grateful to you, Heidi Altman from the National Immigrant Justice Center.
Thank you, Congresswoman. What a privilege to be here today to celebrate the reintroduction of this bill. And I would also like us together to reaffirm that one day it will become law. And we will be here, and we will celebrate that day, and we will be fighting together until it happens. I'm the Vice President of Policy at the National Immigration Law Center, where we advocate for justice for low-income immigrants. And for about 20 years, like Sarah, I have represented and advocated for and alongside people who have survived or are surviving the United States immigration detention system. One thing I know for sure, immigration detention is designed to break the spirit of the people inside its walls. And you heard that firsthand today. Every person inside an ICE jail or prison is separated from their families. This is an intentional form of family separation. The vast majority of them are unable to find a lawyer, and despair often forces them to give up their rights and accept deportation. Make no mistake, this is not a byproduct of the system. It is the intended consequence. This is the case today, and it was the case back in the 1980s when the immigration detention system as we know it today first began to grow, fueled then and now by the greed of private prison executives and by fear of people who our government tells us are the other, but are not. So who are the tens of thousands of people stuck in ICE prisons and jails as we stand here today? Our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues, our children's teachers. Because of their place of birth, they are enduring so many horrors, and you have heard some of them today firsthand. They are enduring medical neglect. They cannot get treatment for the cancer they were diagnosed with before they were detained. They are thrown in solitary confinement when they dare to complain about the horrible treatment they are enduring. They are fed food with worms, torn from their children and their livelihoods. They are called names and racist slurs by the officers, and if they happen to be a member of the LGBT community, they will almost certainly face harassment, assault, or worse. But we're here today because we know it can be different. We know study after study, as you've heard, shows that immigrants voluntarily appear for their immigration court cases. We can imagine a different approach. One where we support and welcome our neighbors as they navigate the U.S. immigration system, where we greet people seeking asylum with community support and nourishment instead of handcuffs. And we are so lucky that Congresswoman Jayapal has this vision and that she and Congressman Smith have been championing this vision for years with this critical bill. And we are beyond grateful for your leadership and your perseverance. At the National Immigration Law Center, we're so proud to endorse the Dignity for Detained Immigrants Act and proud to call very loudly today on every member of Congress to sign on today. Thank you to the members who are here today, to my fellow speakers who are here fighting for dignity. We know you won't give up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Tomorrow we'll have our fifth shadow hearing that I lead as ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee, and it's specifically on detention. I hope you all will cover that as well. Happy to open it up for questions if anyone has them. I do. The question was, do we see opportunity to advance legislation? I do, because I actually think the American people across ideology, across political party, are looking at what's happening and saying, this is not who we are, this is not what I want. I think there were many people who were taken by the misinformation and disinformation that was being spread about criminals in our communities and all of that. But they see that that's not what's happening. And so there is a renewed interest in understanding how this could possibly be happening in our streets, at our schools, at our community centers, and seeing people like those that you heard about today, heard from and heard about today, who have done absolutely nothing wrong and defy all of the stereotypes and misinformation that are being put out there. So I think that the American people don't like this, don't want this. And my hope is that we will get some courageous Republicans on the other side to say this is not how we should do this. But in the meantime, look, we're going to push forward because Congress is often behind the American people, but we need to continue the momentum. And this is quite, I know for you all cover Congress, you know that getting a bill on immigration with 123 co-sponsors from the get-go on reforming the detention system is not an easy thing, but I think a lot of people are horrified by what they've been seeing.
This is a reintroduction of legislation from 2023. What has changed, if anything, in it, and do you have it?
We've added some provisions to respond to the things that we're seeing, because obviously it's the massive increase in using mandatory detention. So the repeal of mandatory detention, the provision, which really shouldn't be necessary, but we put it in anyway, around oversight, has been very important. The categories of expanded vulnerable populations, because we're seeing people being picked up who are sole caregivers. A number of those things we've strengthened because we're seeing the abuses by this administration. And I think that, the phase out of private for-profit detention centers, that has always been a part of this, just as we phased out of the criminal justice system, if you remember, with bipartisan support, because it's actually more expensive for taxpayers to do this than to do the kinds of alternatives that we are proposing.
So this was an issue you saw
We've seen a continuation of expansion, as Heidi said, of the for-profit detention center, but it has never been at the level that it is today with the resources and the lack of accountability of today. It is quite significantly different, but it is built on a system that has been in place and unfortunately now given enormous resources and rhetoric to expand. One more if we have it. Yes.
On the provisions, it sounds like a number of them are sort of a departure from the effective enforcement of U.S. immigration law. Wouldn't this ultimately codify Biden's catch and release policy?
The detention system has nothing to do with catch and release. It has to do with due process under the law and the ability that people have to actually go through court cases in order to, the immigration system is a civil legal immigration system. I would just say that the people that are being picked up right now by this administration, some are U.S. citizens, as was mentioned. Some have been green card holders for a long time. The rationale for going out and kidnapping and disappearing, abducting, I think was the word that Dr. Suri used, and that's right. People are being abducted in the street with no attention given whatsoever to the Constitution and to due process. As I mentioned, 220 judges across the country, including 23 appointed by Donald Trump, have said that this mass detention policy is absolutely against the rule of law. Okay, thanks everybody. Appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Thanks to our speakers. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, so that will do it for the press conference in Washington, D.C. with Democratic leaders speaking about rights and immigration rights more specifically. And let me see if I can get a more specific title for you on what we were just watching. News conference on immigrant rights from House Democrats. And we were also at the Senate appropriations hearing on Russian abduction of Ukrainian children. That appears to be in some sort of recess as we continue to monitor that meeting. It doesn't look like it's adjourned based on what we're seeing, but again, appears to be in some sort of recess at the moment. Now, there is a live press conference featuring Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries that looks like it'll be starting at some point here soon, but the podium remains vacant for the time being. So we're going to do something a little bit unique here. Well, let's do two things. Let's give an update on the big story that we've been following this afternoon, and that is a shooting at the MGM National Harbor Hotel and Casino that occurred around noon today. Prince George's County Fire and Rescue responding to reports at the MGM in Oxon Hill, Maryland, not far from Washington, D.C., and they arrived just before noon to a shooting at the food court. One man found dead in the food court, believed to be in his 20s. Officials initially said a second man had a graze wound, but later said in a press conference that no others were injured. Now, we were able to tune in for the second half of that press conference in order to try to gather some more information. Police believe that this was a targeted incident, not a random shooting, and that the victim was ordering food. The suspect appeared. There was no exchange between the victim and the suspect began firing. As for that suspect, there is still a search for the suspect at the last time that we received an update, and they do have the suspect on video. And for the most part, the casino remains open. Police say that they believe everything that they need, every investigative piece is contained to the food court. So the MGM is still open. Nearby schools, however, are on lockdown out of an abundance of caution. The suspect fled the scene, and again, they are still looking for the suspect as far as our last update. So we just wanted to give one more update on that story, and now we're still waiting for this press conference to start featuring Senator Jeffries and Senator Schumer and Representative Jeffries. But before that gets started, we're going to listen in on head coach James Franklin from Virginia Tech's press conference on National Signing Day. A number of recruits flipping over to the Hokies with the arrival of James Franklin. Let's listen to the head coach on his first National Signing Day as the coach at Virginia Tech.
What we're going to be able to do in the future with all the resources here, the brand of Virginia Tech, the academic reputation of the university, and then also a little bit of elbow grease. So excited about the class. We were able to cover both sides of the ball as well as special teams. Pretty much every position covered as well. We're always going to emphasize up front the O-line and the D-line. Those are positions that it takes time to develop. And if you fall behind in those areas, it's hard to get caught up. I learned that lesson the hard way when I got the Penn State job. I think there was 4 or 5 scholarship offensive linemen in the entire program. So I learned that lesson the hard way, and that's something we'll always make sure we do a great job of recruiting. And then I think you also saw that we took a tremendous amount of pride in the state of Virginia. That will always be the case. It's got to start at home with the high school players, with the high school coaches. Obviously, we got to do a great job in the region, and we got to be able to go national as well. But if you don't take care of your own backyard, it's hard to do any of those other things. So it starts here at home. Everybody talks about the 757 when you talk about recruiting the state of Virginia, but it's really the entire state. And we got tremendous respect for the entire state of Virginia, and we will treat it as a priority. So happy to answer questions. And again, just overall, very, very pleased with all the hard work that we put in this to put Virginia Tech in the best chance to be successful moving forward. So open up the questions.
I will start with Damien. James, you brought up relationships, and not just with players from your former stomping grounds, but players who had visited, who had committed elsewhere. How much did that play a factor in being able to get them here on campus and be able to sell them Virginia Tech and sell them the vision of playing for you?
Yeah, so I think for almost all of them, we were recruiting at some point over the last 2 years, whether guys had come to camp, whether guys had been up for junior days, or whether guys had just kind of followed what we were doing, at other schools. So I think that helped. I also think the core group of guys that were committed to Virginia Tech were committed to Virginia Tech for the right reasons and felt like this was the right place for them and their family. And they were being patient to try to figure out who the head coach was going to be. And then when we combined all those factors, I think it worked out really well. But this is still a relationship business, and whether that is staff or whether that is recruiting, that plays a big part in this. And when I talk about relationships, I talk about significant relationships with the players, with their high school coaches, and their parents. When you're talking about a different school that's probably 5 hours away in a very different conference, and those people felt strongly enough about Virginia Tech, our staff, me, the potential of this place, and then the resources, because relationships are important. But I've had relationships with kids that I feel like our relationship was better than any other place in the country. But if the NIL package is too wide, this isn't the old days of 85 scholarships where it just comes down to relationships and what you've been able to produce on the field. So you got to have the resources. That's the reality of today's college football. So, a lot of things have gone into it. But again, I'm very pleased with the class overall, especially when you consider the circumstances. I don't know if this has really happened before. We have official visits, and we have the tight end from Minnesota, Pierce, and he says, "What does the tight end room look like, Coach?" I said, "I have no idea. I've been here 3 days. I can't tell you. Who's the tight ends coach going to be? You have to trust me. Who's the offensive coordinator going to be? You have to trust me." We had 17 recruits here on the second week, and I'm the only coach. And, I really didn't have answers for them. But I think it's a very unique situation. I don't know if it's ever happened before. And you think about, I think the class when we got the job, I think the class was 124, depending on which service you look at. And it's not over yet, but I think we're somewhere inside the top 25 right now. So, I'm proud and I'm excited. It's a start. We still got a ton of work to do.
Let's go to David Teo and then Andy Bennett.
You have any water?
You mentioned the unique circumstances surrounding all of this, a lot of it fueled by the bizarre coaching hires and departures of the last few months. How beneficial were those 2 recruiting weekends here that no other new hire really had? And how many of the young men that you signed today were on campus these past 2 weekends? Do you know?
Yes, sir. So I don't know if I have the exact number of Tristan or Kevin. You can look that up. But I think almost all of them, either the first weekend or the second weekend. So it was really beneficial, and it was needed, right? But I would also say there's also differences, right? Some of these coaches took jobs, and there was 19 kids committed there, and none of them decommitted. I saw one coach show up, and the number 1 recruit in the country was waiting for him when he got off the plane. That was not the situation here. We had a core group of guys that were committed, but we had to build it. We had to build it. But we've done this before. We built a foundation and a program at Vanderbilt, at a place that hadn't really had it in the previous 30 years before we got there. And one of the things I'm very, very proud about, my time at Penn State is people are talking about that program like one of the best programs in college football and a consistent title contender. And we weren't part of those conversations when I got there. So this is a really good foundation to build on. We have some lessons and a model that we learned over those last 2 experiences that we'll use here. But I think that's also where the Virginia Tech staff has been critical too, because all these places are unique and they're sophisticated, and we don't have the institutional knowledge or the community knowledge yet. So we have to kind of blend and merge these 2 things together to put us in the best position moving forward. Kevin, do you guys have those numbers ballpark? 22 official visits, but how many of the guys committed were here on official visits? There's only one that I can think of that was not on an official visit with us.
Yeah, it was only one.
Yeah, one. Yeah, it was Zay. Zay was the one guy. He went and visited West Virginia, had us nervous, but we were able to get it done.
James, the quarterback you signed, Troy Hune, long way to go across the country here. What did you like about his style? Does his style of play say anything about the type of offense you'd like to run here?
No, he's just a really good player that we had identified early on. Came to camp and threw for us. He's 6'4" ballpark. He's 220 pounds ballpark. He ran 4.75 for us. I think he'll end up being a 4.6 guy. His senior year, you saw him take a big stride in terms of making plays with his legs, and that's going to be important. I don't care whether it's the NFL, college, or high school. In today's day and age, you got to be able to make plays at the quarterback position with your mind, with your arm, and with your legs, and he has the ability to do that. I was able to go watch him play live this year. He had a great senior year. I think he completed like 74% of his passes this year. His touchdown to interception ratio is really good. His high school, I think, went as far as they've gone in a long time. And he wasn't playing on a team that was loaded with other Division I players, right? We've had a chance to get to know him as a person, as a student, the family. Dad played college football. Mom was a college basketball coach. Very competitive family, and we think he's got a chance to be good. So we're excited about his future, but we're going to recruit quarterbacks that we think we can win with, and then you have to have enough flexibility within your system to take advantage of the personnel you have. I think that's one of the kind of big things that is a little bit.
All right, taking what he did at those other two institutions, Penn State and Vanderbilt, doing it at Virginia Tech and Blacksburg. A new era begins for the Hokies after a disappointing season. No bowl game, but a big signing day for Virginia Tech. And Coach Franklin has talked quite a bit about making sure big-time recruits in Virginia stay in Virginia. Now, speaking of Virginia, football, that is not the only program doing big things. UVA will be in the ACC Championship this weekend at 8 o'clock p.m. on this very station, ABC, not 13 News Now Plus, but ABC. Speaking of ABC, we'll be back at 4 p.m. with news for you on ABC. For now, that's it for Live Impact News. We're almost out of time. Naya, any last words?
No last words.
No last words. See you tomorrow, everybody.